Hey guys, tonight we begin not with a battlefield, not with a throne room, not even with a coronation, but with a dinner table. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. The year doesn't matter yet. The place could be anywhere. A hall lit by oil lamps, or torches, or candles that flicker like they're nervous. The air smells like roasted meat, spiced wine, and something floral you can't quite name. Maybe rose water, maybe just expensive anxiety. There's music, soft and careful, played by someone who knows their job depends on not being noticed. Laughter rolls through the room in waves, but it's the kind of laughter that doesn't reach anyone's eyes. Every smile is a calculation, every toast a test. You're standing at the threshold now, watching, and here's what you notice first: no one is relaxed. Not the man reclining on the cushioned couch near the head of the table, draped in silk that cost more than a farmer's yearly income. Not the woman 2 seats down, whose jewelry catches the light just a little too deliberately. Not even the servants, who move like shadows, refilling cups and clearing plates with the kind of silence that comes from years of practice and a healthy fear of being remembered. Because here's the thing about ancient banquets: they weren't really about food. Oh sure, there was food, lots of it. Peacocks, roasted and feathered to look alive. Honey, glazed dormice. Whole boars with apples in their mouths. Oysters shipped in from the coast packed in snow. Fruit carved into shapes that had no business being fruit. The kind of spread that makes you wonder if anyone actually ate or just spent the whole night performing the act of eating. But the food? That was set dressing. The real meal was power, and everyone at that table was either serving it, consuming it, or choking on it. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're invited to a dinner party. Sounds nice, right? Except when you walk in, you realize your seat has already been chosen for you. And that seat, where you sit, who you sit next to, how close you are to the host, that seat determines your salary, your reputation, maybe even your lifespan. Still sound nice. That was every banquet in the ancient world. A gorgeous, glittering, heavily perfumed trap where the wrong toast could end your career and the right compliment could save your family. And everyone knew it. The hosts knew it. The guests knew it. Even the musicians knew it, which is why they played so quietly. So tonight, we're going to talk about the banquet, not as a celebration, not as a feast, but as a battlefield. One where the weapons were goblets, and the armor was embroidered silk, and the casualties were usually social, but occasionally very, very literal. We're going to walk through the halls of Rome, where emperors reclined on couches and decided your fate between courses. We're going to visit the courts of ancient China, where the placement of a single cup could signal favor or exile. We're going to sit in the mead halls of the north, where a king's generosity was measured in gold rings and the silence of his enemies. And we're going to see how, across every culture, every century, every empire, when powerful people gathered to eat, they were really gathering to compete. Because here's the truth that no one likes to admit. Humans have always been weird about food. We don't just eat to survive. We eat to prove things, to show wealth, to display taste, to demonstrate control, to humiliate rivals, to seduce allies, to buy loyalty, to cement hierarchy. We've been doing this for thousands of years, and we're still doing it now. The only difference is that in the ancient world, they were way more honest about it. A Roman senator didn't pretend his 12-course dinner was about catching up with friends. He knew exactly what it was: a power move. A Tang dynasty official didn't act like the emperor's banquet was a casual hangout. He understood it was a performance where every gesture mattered and every mistake was recorded. And that honesty, that clarity, it makes ancient banquets kind of beautiful in a terrible, exhausting way. So let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of a specific banquet, but the beginning of the idea of a banquet. The moment humans stopped eating alone in caves and started eating together in groups. Because that's where it all went wrong. Or right. Depending on how you feel about social hierarchies and passive-aggressive seating arrangements. Anthropologists will tell you that communal eating is one of the foundational acts of human civilization. Sharing food built trust. It created bonds. It turned strangers into allies and allies into families. All true. Lovely, even. But here's what they sometimes skip over: communal eating also created rankings. The moment you have more than two people sitting down to share a meal, someone has to decide who eats first, who gets the best cut of meat, who sits closest to the fire. And once you make those decisions, congratulations, you've just invented social hierarchy, not with laws or weapons or speeches, but with dinner. Think about it. In early human societies, the best hunter didn't just get respect. He got the best portion. The tribal elder didn't just get wisdom. She got to eat before everyone else. The chief didn't just lead. He hosted. And hosting meant control. It meant deciding who was welcome, who was honored, and who was subtly reminded of their place by being seated near the door where the draft was worst. Food became a language. And like any language, it could be used to praise, to insult, to seduce, to threaten. By the time we get to the ancient civilizations, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, Persia, this language had become incredibly sophisticated. Banquets weren't just meals, they were rituals. Highly choreographed events where every detail, the menu, the seating, the music, the toasts, even the timing of when dishes arrived, was loaded with meaning. And if you didn't know how to read that meaning, well, you were about to learn the hard way. Let's take ancient Greece, for example. The symposium. Now, if you've heard of the symposium, you might think it was a philosophical gathering where wise men reclined on couches, sipped wine, and discussed the nature of truth and beauty. And sure, that happened. Sometimes. But the symposium was also a social minefield. First, you had to be invited. And not just invited. Invited by the right person. The host's status determined your status. Show up to a symposium hosted by a nobody, and you were a nobody. Show up to one hosted by a powerful aristocrat, and suddenly you mattered. Second, once you arrived, your position in the room was assigned. The most important guest reclined on the couch closest to the host. The least important, furthest away, probably near the door where the servants kept bumping into you. Third, the wine. Oh, the wine. It wasn't just poured and drunk. It was mixed. Water and wine in specific ratios, decided by the symposiarch, the ruler of the drinking. And that ruler could make your night delightful or miserable, depending on how strong he made your cup. Too weak, and you were being insulted. Too strong, and you were being set up to embarrass yourself. Fourth, the conversation. You were expected to contribute, to be witty, informed, eloquent, but not too witty, not too informed. You had to read the room, match the tone, compliment the host, flatter the important guests, and do it all while reclining on a couch and trying not to spill wine on your chiton. Romantic, right? Nope. It was a performance, a test, a game where the stakes were your reputation and the rules were never written down because everyone was supposed to just know. And if you didn't? If you drank too much, or laughed too loudly, or told the wrong story, or complimented the wrong person, well, good luck. Because by tomorrow morning, everyone in Athens would know you were a fool. Now let's jump to Rome. Because if Greece invented the intellectual dinner party, Rome turned it into a full contact sport. The Roman convivium, literally, living together, was the empire's favorite way to flex, and Romans loved to flex. They built aqueducts, conquered continents, and threw banquets so extravagant that even the guests were embarrassed. Well, publicly embarrassed. Privately, they were taking notes. At a Roman banquet, the seating arrangement was everything. Literally called the lectus, the couch. It determined your entire social standing. The host reclined on the central couch, the lectus medius. The guest of honor was to his right. Everyone else was arranged in descending order of importance, like a human pyramid made of silk and suppressed resentment. If you were seated far from the host, you knew it. Everyone knew it. And the host wanted you to know that everyone knew it. The food, too, was a message. Serve a guest expensive delicacies, dormouse, flamingo tongues, imported spices, and you were honoring them. Serve them the same boring lentil stew everyone else got. That was a statement. A loud one. Roman hosts were also fond of humiliating their guests through food. The satirist Juvenal describes a banquet where the host served himself and his favorites luxurious dishes, while lower status guests got scraps. Same table. Different worlds. The point wasn't subtlety. The point was to make sure everyone understood exactly where they stood. And the entertainment. Oh, the entertainment. Dancers, musicians, acrobats, poets, sometimes gladiators, sometimes actors performing scenes from mythology, and occasionally, if the host was particularly rich and particularly cruel, exotic animals. Live ones. One emperor, Elagabalus, a name that should come with a warning label, once released lions, leopards, and bears into the dining hall during a banquet. They were tame, supposedly, but the guests didn't know that. They screamed, fainted, climbed onto tables. Elagabalus thought it was hilarious. That's the kind of energy we're dealing with here. Banquets weren't safe, they were theatre. And you were both audience and actor, never quite sure when the script would turn on you. Now, let's travel east, to China, where banquets were just as political, just as hierarchical, but wrapped in a philosophy that made everything feel even more suffocating. In ancient China, particularly during the Zhou dynasty and later, banquets were governed by li, a concept that translates roughly to ritual propriety. Everything had a correct form, a correct order, a correct way to bow, to toast, to receive a cup, to offer a dish. Mess it up, and you weren't just rude. You were disrupting cosmic harmony. No pressure. The emperor or the host sat facing south, the direction of power and light. Guests were arranged by rank, age, and relationship to the host. The wine ritual, lijiu, was an elaborate dance of offering and receiving, where every gesture was a sign of respect or submission. And here's the thing, it wasn't optional. You couldn't just skip the ritual or improvate. The rules were ancient, codified, and everyone was watching. Especially the people who wanted your job. Chinese banquets were also deeply tied to Confucian ideals of hierarchy and loyalty. A minister invited to the emperor's table wasn't just being fed. He was being tested. Could he perform the rituals correctly? Could he toast with the right words? Could he accept favor without appearing greedy, or decline without appearing disloyal? It was a tightrope walk, and the fall was a long one. In the Tang dynasty, banquets became even more elaborate. Poetry was recited. Calligraphy was displayed. Dishes were presented as works of art. But underneath all that beauty was the same iron logic. The table reflected the empire. Your place at the table reflected your place in the world. And if the emperor wanted to remind you that your place was beneath him, he didn't need to say a word. He just had to seat you a little further away. And then there's the north. The mead halls of the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, the Germanic tribes, where the banquet wasn't a delicate ritual, it was a roar. In the mead hall, the king or chieftain sat at the high seat, flanked by his most trusted warriors. The hall was loud, smoky, full of fire and meat and the smell of fermented honey. Men boasted. They drank. They swore oaths. They gave gifts, gold rings, weapons, land. And in return, they expected loyalty. Because in the north, the banquet was a contract. The king fed you, so you fought for him. He gave you treasure, so you gave him your life. It was transactional, but it was also sacred. Break that contract, and you weren't just a traitor. You were cursed. The mead hall was also where reputations were made and destroyed. A warrior who boasted too much and failed to deliver, mocked. A warrior who stayed silent and then performed great deeds, celebrated. The hall was a stage, and your performance determined whether you were remembered as a hero or a fool. And the gift-giving. Oh, the gift-giving. It wasn't generosity. It was strategy. A king who gave lavishly was showing strength. A king who gave sparingly was showing weakness. And a king who gave to some warriors but not others. He was sending a message. A very clear one. So whether you're in Rome, reclining on a couch with a cup of wine that might be poisoned, or in Changon, performing a ritual toast that might end your career, or in a med hall in the frozen north, swearing an oath you'll probably die keeping. The banquet is the same. It's a place where power is served on a plate, where every gesture is a move in a game you didn't choose to play but can't afford to lose, where the food is delicious and the company is deadly. And here's the strangest part: we still do this. We still care about where we sit at a wedding. We still stress about who gets invited to the work dinner. We still read meaning into who the boss talks to, who gets the good wine, who gets thanked in the speech. We've dressed it up, made it polite, pretended it's about networking or team building. But deep down, it's the same ancient game. The table is a map, and your place on it is your place in the world. So tonight, we're going to explore that map. We're going to walk through the banquet halls of history and see how emperors and kings and generals and poets all used dinner as a weapon, a gift, a punishment, a seduction. We're going to start where the feast was most theatrical, most dangerous, most absurdly over the top. We're going to start in Rome, because if there's one place in history where the banquet became an art form, a blood sport, and a cautionary tale all at once, it's there. So pour yourself a drink, get comfortable, and let's recline on a couch in the eternal city, where the wine flows, the intrigue is thick, and the peacock is watching you. It begins with a sound. Not music, not speech, just the soft fall of petals from the ceiling. Rose petals. Thousands of them, released from hidden panels in the vaulted roof, drifting down like pink snow onto the heads of reclining senators, freedmen, poets, and whichever unfortunate cousin the emperor decided to invite this week. They land on silver platters. They settle into wine cups. They stick to the oil, slicked foreheads of men pretending to be delighted. Because that's the first rule of a Roman banquet: you pretend. You pretend the ceiling raining flowers is charming, not absurd. You pretend the peacock on your plate, feathered to look alive, is delicious and not disturbingly theatrical. You pretend you're honored to be here, even though you've been seated so far from the host that you might as well be in a different province. And most importantly, you pretend you're not afraid, but you are. Everyone is. Because this isn't dinner. This is a performance. And the emperor, let's say it's Nero tonight, or Domitian, or that walking scandal Elagabalus, he's not the host, he's the director. And you? You're an actor who didn't get the script. The room is vast. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Columns wrapped in silk. Fountains trickling in the corners, their soft splash mixing with the murmur of flutes and lyres. The air smells like roasted meat, spiced wine, and something floral you can't quite place. Maybe saffron, maybe just expensive anxiety. You're reclining on a couch, not sitting, reclining. Because in Rome, sitting upright at dinner is what barbarians do. Civilized people, people with status, recline on cushioned couches called lecti, propped on one elbow, bare feet resting on embroidered pillows. It looks elegant in mosaics. In reality, it's uncomfortable. Your arm goes numb. And if you're not careful, you'll spill wine all over yourself and become the evening's entertainment. The couches are arranged in a U shape around a low table. 3 couches. 9 people, if the host is traditional. The central couch, the lectus medius, belongs to the host. The place of honor is to his right. Everyone else is ranked in descending order of importance, like a human seating chart designed by someone who enjoys passive aggression. And here's the thing, everyone knows where they've been placed. The host knows. The other guests know. The slaves pouring wine know. Even the musicians know, which is why they keep their eyes down and their melodies soft. If you're close to the host, congratulations. You matter. You're favored. You're safe. For now, if you're far from the host, near the edge, near the door, near the draft, well, that's a message. A very public one. And everyone at the table just received it. Welcome to the triclinium, the Roman dining room, where proximity to power is measured in couch cushions and the quality of your appetizer. Let's talk about the food. Because the food isn't just food, it's a language. And if you don't speak it fluently, You're about to be humiliated in front of everyone who matters. The first course arrives. For the host and his favourites, oysters on a bed of snow, shipped from the coast and kept cold by some logistical miracle involving slaves, ice houses, and a budget that could feed a village for a year. Dormouse glazed with honey and poppy seeds, flamingo tongues. Yes, flamingo tongues. Because regular poultry is for people who don't own half of Gaul. And for you, if you're lucky, figs, maybe some bread, possibly a small portion of fish that's been sitting out just long enough to make you wonder. Same table, different worlds. The Roman satirist Juvenal wrote about this. He described a banquet where the host gorged on delicacies while his lower status guests were served scraps, stale bread, cheap wine, fish so old it had opinions. The message wasn't subtle. It was a statement, a reminder that even here, even at this table, you are not equal. You are tolerated, and you can't complain. You can't even look disappointed, because if you do, if you show even a flicker of resentment, the host will know, and so will everyone else. And by tomorrow, all of Rome will know you're ungrateful, difficult, not worth inviting again. So you smile, you take a small bite of your sad fig, you compliment the host on his exquisite taste, and you swallow your pride along with the bread. The wine, too, is a weapon. In Rome, wine wasn't served straight. It was mixed with water, sometimes with honey, sometimes with spices, by a slave who knew exactly how strong to make each guest's cup. And that strength, that was decided by the host. Serve someone weak, watered-down wine, and you're calling them a lightweight, a child, someone who can't handle the real thing. Serve someone wine that's too strong, and you're setting them up, because in a few hours they'll be drunk. And drunk people make mistakes. They say things they shouldn't. They laugh too loud. They insult the wrong person, and everyone will remember. The host, of course, drinks the perfect blend. Not too strong, not too weak. Just enough to appear relaxed, convivial, in control. Because control is the point. The host controls the menu, the seating, the wine, the entertainment. He controls the room. And if you forget that, even for a moment, he'll remind you. Let's talk about the slaves. Because they're everywhere and they're nowhere. They move through the room like shadows, pouring wine, clearing plates, bringing new courses, holding trays, fanning the guests, standing silently in the corners, waiting for a signal. You're not supposed to notice them. You're not supposed to see them. They're part of the decor, functional, invisible, but they see everything. They see who gets the good wine, who gets the bad fish, who the host smiles at and who he ignores. They hear every whispered conversation, every veiled insult, every nervous laugh. They know who's in favor and who's about to fall, and they'll never say a word, because if they do, they'll be beaten, sold, killed, so they stay silent. They keep their faces blank. They refill your cup and vanish before you can thank them. And you barely register their presence. Because in Rome, slaves aren't people, they're tools. And tools don't have opinions. But here's the irony: the entire banquet, this glittering display of wealth and power, only works because of them. Without the slaves, there's no food, no wine, no music, no roses falling from the ceiling. The empire reclines on a couch, but it's the slaves who hold it up. Now the entertainment begins, because a Roman banquet isn't just about eating, it's about spectacle, and the host has spared no expense. First, the musicians. A lyre player, a flutist, maybe a singer with a voice like honey, and a contract that expires if anyone yawns. They play softly, just loud enough to fill the silence, but not loud enough to interrupt conversation. Background music, ambient, forgettable. Then the dancers. Young, graceful, dressed in silk that clings and swirls. They move between the couches, their feet barely touching the floor, their gestures practiced to perfection. Some guests watch, some don't. It doesn't matter. The dancers aren't there to be appreciated. They're there to prove the host can afford them. Next, the poets. Oh, the poets. They recite verses, epic, lyric, sometimes erotic, while the guests pretend to listen. A few nod appreciatively. One or two even applaud. But most are too busy eating, drinking, whispering, calculating. And then, if the host is feeling particularly bold, the real entertainment arrives. Acrobats, dwarfs, exotic animals, gladiators. If the host is rich enough and reckless enough to stage a private fight in his own dining hall. The Emperor Elagabalus, a name that should come with a trigger warning, once released lions, leopards, and bears into a banquet. They were tame, supposedly, but the guests didn't know that. They screamed. They climbed onto tables. They knocked over wine, trampled food, embarrassed themselves in front of the entire court. Elagabalus thought it was hilarious. That's the kind of energy we're dealing with. Roman banquets weren't safe spaces. They were theatres, and sometimes the audience became the show. Petronius, in his Satyricon, describes the banquet of Trimalchio, a wealthy freedman who throws the most absurdly extravagant feast imaginable. The ceiling opens to rain petals. Mechanical birds fly overhead. A roasted boar is brought in, and when it's cut open, live thrushes fly out. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's exactly what Roman banquets were, because subtlety, restraint, those were for philosophers, and philosophers weren't invited to the fun parties. Speaking of philosophers, not everyone loved the banquet culture. In fact, some of Rome's greatest thinkers were disgusted by it. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote scathing critiques of Roman excess. He described banquets where men ate until they vomited, then vomited so they could eat more. Where wealth was flaunted not to enjoy it, but to prove it. Where the pursuit of pleasure had become a kind of madness. He called it moral decay. A symptom of an empire that had conquered the world, but lost its soul. And he wasn't wrong, because here's the thing about Roman banquets, they were beautiful. They were dazzling. They were feats of engineering, artistry, logistics. They were proof that Rome could do anything. But they were also exhausting, hollow, performative. The guests weren't there to enjoy themselves. They were there to survive, to navigate the social minefield, to avoid insult, to curry favor, to leave with their reputation intact. The host wasn't there to celebrate. He was there to dominate, to remind everyone of his wealth, his power, his control, and the empire. The empire was there to distract itself from the wars on the borders, from the corruption in the Senate, from the growing sense that maybe, just maybe, this couldn't last forever. The music fades. The last course is cleared. The guests rise, slowly, stiffly, their limbs numb from hours of reclining. They thank the host. They smile. They compliment the food, the wine, the entertainment. And then they leave. Out into the cool night air, past the marble columns, past the slaves still cleaning up, still invisible. Some guests are drunk. Some are exhausted. Some are pale, dizzy, wondering if they said the wrong thing, sat in the wrong place, offended the wrong person. Tomorrow, they'll find out. Because in Rome, the banquet doesn't end when you leave the table. It ends when the gossip stops, when the alliances are confirmed, when the consequences arrive. And sometimes, those consequences are brutal. A senator who laughed too loudly at the wrong joke might find himself exiled. A freedman who sat too close to the host might be accused of ambition. A poet who recited the wrong verse might never be invited again. Or worse, might be invited specifically to be humiliated. The banquet was a game, and in Rome, losing the game could cost you everything. So here's the truth about Roman banquets. They weren't celebrations of life. They were rehearsals for its collapse. The empire that built aqueducts also built vomitoriums. The civilization that gave us philosophy also gave us flamingo tongues. The culture that valued dignitas, dignity, honor, virtue, also valued who could throw the most obscene party. And in the end, Rome didn't fall because of barbarians at the gates. It fell because it had been devouring itself, one banquet at a time. The table was set, the wine was poured, the guests reclined, and somewhere, in the flickering candlelight, the empire began to choke. But on the other side of the world, another empire found a different way to dine. Less wild, less theatrical, less drenched in wine and excess, but no less dangerous, because in the courts of Tang Dynasty China, the banquet wasn't a circus. It was a ritual, a test. A silent, elegant battlefield where every gesture was a move, every toast a contract, and every mistake was recorded in ink that never faded. So let's leave Rome. Let's leave the roses and the roasted peacocks and the slaves and the vomit. Let's travel east, to a place where the wine was warmed, the seating was sacred, and the emperor's smile could mean life or death. Let's go to Chang'an. It begins not with sound, but with stillness. The hall is vast, so vast that even the emperor's voice, when he speaks, seems to travel across an ocean of air before reaching the farthest guest. The ceiling is painted with dragons, gold and crimson, coiled in eternal motion, their eyes following you no matter where you sit. The floor is polished stone, dark as midnight, reflecting the glow of 100 lanterns hanging from silk cords. The lanterns sway, just slightly, just enough to make the light dance across the faces of the men and women seated below, and they are seated. Not reclining like Romans, not sprawled like barbarians. Seated, upright, hands folded, eyes forward, waiting. This is Chang'an, the heart of the Tang dynasty, the center of the world if you ask anyone here. And tonight, in this palace hall, the emperor is hosting a banquet. But it is not a feast. It is a ritual. And every person in this room knows it. The emperor sits at the far end of the hall, facing south, always south. Because south is the direction of warmth, of light, of heaven's favor. The emperor does not face his guests. He faces the cosmos. And the guests, officials, generals, poets, ministers, they face him. Or rather, they face the idea of him, because from this distance, in this light, the emperor is less a man and more a symbol. A figure in gold robes, framed by incense smoke, silent and still as a statue. You cannot see his expression. You cannot read his mood. You can only wait and hope. Because in this hall, proximity is everything. If you are seated close to the emperor, within the first 3 rows, within sight of his table, you matter. You are favored. You are trusted. For now, if you are seated farther back, near the columns, near the shadows, you are being reminded of your place. Politely, elegantly, but unmistakably. And if you are seated near the door, well, that's not a seat. That's a warning. The seating arrangement is not random. It is geometry, a map of power drawn in silk cushions and lacquered tables. Every official knows where he sits. Every minister knows who sits beside him and who does not. Every poet knows that the distance between his table and the emperor's is also the distance between his career and oblivion. And no one complains. No one protests. Because to question your seat is to question the emperor's judgment, and to question the emperor's judgment is to question heaven itself. So you sit, you fold your hands, you wait, and you watch. The servants move through the hall like ghosts, barefoot, silent, dressed in pale robes that blend into the stone. They carry trays of food, delicate, artful, almost too beautiful to eat. Steamed fish arranged to look like swimming. Dumplings folded into the shape of lotus flowers. Fruit carved into birds, into blossoms, into tiny sculptures that seem to glow in the lantern light. Each dish is placed on the table with precision. No sound, no clatter. Just the soft whisper of porcelain meeting wood. The wine is warm, not hot, not cold, warm. Served in jade cups that catch the light and hold it, glowing faintly green. The servants pour with both hands, their movements slow and deliberate, as if every gesture is part of a dance they learned in childhood and will perform until they die. And the wine itself, it is not just wine, it is Lygia, ritual wine, the wine of loyalty, of respect, of submission. You do not drink it when you want, you drink it when you are told. The emperor raises his cup. Slowly, the hall holds its breath, and then, in unison, every guest raises theirs. Not before, not after, with him. This is not a toast, it is a test. Because if you raise your cup too early, you are presumptuous. If you raise it too late, you are disrespectful. And if you spill even a drop, if your hand trembles, if your timing is off by even a heartbeat, everyone will notice. And they will remember. The emperor drinks. The guests drink. The cups are lowered. The servants refill them. And the ritual begins again. No one speaks, not yet. Because speech in this hall is not casual, it is performance. And the first performance of the evening is about to begin. A man rises, an official. Middle-aged, well-dressed, his face carefully blank. He steps forward into the space between the tables and the emperor's dais. He bows 3 times, low, slow, deliberate, and then he recites poetry. Classical, elegant. Every line perfectly memorized, every pause calculated. The poem is about loyalty, about the beauty of the empire, about the wisdom of the emperor, the harmony of heaven and earth, the eternal glory of the Tang. It is beautiful, it is flawless, it is safe. Because in this hall, poetry is not art, it is diplomacy. Every word is a declaration of allegiance. Every metaphor is a promise. Every verse is a way of saying, I am loyal, I am useful. Please do not forget me. The official finishes. He bows again. The emperor nods, just once, just barely. And the official returns to his seat, his face still blank, his hands still steady. But inside he is trembling, because he does not know if the nod meant approval, or dismissal, or nothing at all. No one knows. That is the point. Another official rises. Another poem. This one about the changing seasons, about the impermanence of blossoms, about the virtue of patience. It is also flawless. It is also safe. And so it goes. One by one, the officials perform. They recite. They bow. They return to their seats. And the emperor nods or does not nod, and no one knows what it means. This is the banquet. Not food, not wine, not conversation. This. The performance of virtue, the display of refinement, the endless, exhausting ritual of proving that you belong. And if you fail, if your poem is clumsy, if your bow is too shallow, if your voice cracks, you will not be punished. Not tonight, not here. But tomorrow, when the appointments are announced, when the promotions are decided, when the emperor's favor is distributed like rain, you will be dry, and everyone will know why. The music begins. Soft. So soft you almost don't hear it at first. It comes from behind a silk screen at the side of the hall. You cannot see the musicians. You are not meant to. They are invisible. Like the servants, like the walls. But you can hear them, the guqin. A 7-stringed zither, its notes long and low, like water flowing over stone. The pipa. A lute, its sound bright and quick, like birds in flight. The dizzy. A bamboo flute. Its melody thin and haunting, like wind through empty halls. The music does not fill the room. It inhabits it. It moves through the space like incense smoke, curling around the columns, drifting past the lanterns, settling into the silence between breaths. No one applauds. No one reacts. Because the music is not entertainment. It is atmosphere. A reminder that this is not just a banquet. It is a ceremony. A sacred act. A moment when heaven and earth align, and the emperor, seated at the center, holds them in balance. And you are part of that balance. A single note in the symphony. A single thread in the tapestry. And if you break the harmony, if you disrupt the pattern, the entire structure will collapse. Or at least, that is what you are meant to believe. A woman enters. A court dancer. Her robes are crimson and gold, layered like petals, trailing behind her as she moves. Her face is painted white, her lips red, her eyes lined with black. She looks like a painting, like something that should not move, but does. She dances, slowly. Her arms rise and fall like wings. Her sleeves sweep through the air, creating shapes, circles, waves, dragons. Her feet barely touch the ground. She moves as if the floor is water, as if gravity does not apply to her. The dance is called Nishang Yui, the rainbow and feather robe dance. It is famous. It is ancient. It is said to have been composed by the emperor himself, in a dream, after visiting the moon. No one knows if that is true. But it does not matter. The story is more important than the truth. The dancer does not smile. She does not look at the guests. She dances for the emperor, only the emperor, and when she finishes, she bows low, graceful, perfect, and retreats behind the silk screen. The hall is silent. The emperor does not clap. He does not speak. He simply nods, and the dancer vanishes, like she was never there. The wine is poured again. The toasts continue. The poems resume. And slowly, gradually, the mood begins to shift. Not louder, not wilder, just heavier. Because this is the part of the banquet where the real work begins. The part where alliances are tested. Where favors are asked. Where loyalty is measured in glances, in gestures, in the angle of a bow. An official leans toward his neighbor, whispers something. The neighbor nods. Another official watches them, makes a note, mental, not written, but a note nonetheless. A minister raises his cup toward a general. The general raises his in return. A silent agreement. Or a silent threat. It is impossible to tell. The emperor watches, or seems to, from this distance. It is hard to say, but everyone assumes he is watching. And so they behave as if he is. Because in this hall, the emperor does not need to see everything. He only needs you to believe he does, and you do. You always do. A cup falls, not dropped. Just tipped. Wine spills across the table, dark and slow, pooling on the lacquered surface like blood. Everyone freezes. The servant who poured it goes pale. He drops to his knees, presses his forehead to the floor, does not speak, does not move. The official whose cup it was, he does not react. He does not look at the servant. He does not look at the wine. He simply raises his hand, a small gesture. It's fine. Continue. The servant is removed. Silently. Quickly. He will be punished later, not severely. Just enough. Enough to remind him. Enough to remind everyone that nothing here is accidental. That every action has a consequence. That even a spilled cup of wine can be a symbol of carelessness, of disrespect, of the fragility of order. The banquet continues. But the mood has changed. The music sounds quieter. The lanterns seem dimmer. The air feels thicker, harder to breathe. Because everyone in this hall knows the truth. The empire is magnificent. The court is refined. The rituals are perfect. But perfection is exhausting. And refinement is a mask. And beneath the silk and the jade and the poetry, there is fear. Fear of falling, fear of failing, fear of being forgotten. And fear, most of all, of the moment when the music stops and the silence reveals what everyone has been pretending not to see, that the empire, like the lanterns, is swaying, just slightly, just enough. And one day it will fall, but not tonight. Tonight, the banquet continues. The wine is warm. The poems are flawless. The emperor nods or does not nod, and the guests bow, and the servants move like ghosts, and the music plays on. And far away, beyond the walls of Changan, beyond the borders of the empire, in colder lands where the snow falls thick and the nights are long, another kind of feast is waiting. No silk, no jade, no poetry, just fire, and mead, and the sound of laughter so loud it shakes the rafters, a place where no one bows, where no one whispers, where the only ritual is to drink until you can't stand and then drink some more. A place where power is not silent, it is roaring. Let's go north, to the halls of the Vikings, where the banquet is not a ceremony, it is a war cry. It begins with a roar, not of men but of fire. The flames rise from the center of the hall, tall and wild, fed by logs as thick as a man's thigh. The smoke curls upward, black and heavy, swirling toward the roof beams. Beams blackened by 100 winters, 100 feasts, 100 nights of laughter and song. The hall is long, longer than any Roman triclinium, longer than any Tang palace chamber, built from timber and iron and the bones of ships that sailed too far and came back broken. The walls are lined with shields, round, painted, dented from battle. The floor is packed earth, covered in rushes and straw, soaked with spilled mead and the blood of slaughtered animals. And it is loud. The fire roars. The men roar. The hall itself seems to breathe. This is not a banquet. This is a storm, and you are inside it. The chieftain sits at the far end of the hall, on a high seat carved from oak. His back is to the wall. His face is to the fire. He is broad-shouldered, grey-bearded, his arms thick with silver rings, gifts from kings, spoils from raids, tokens of loyalty earned in blood. He does not speak. Not yet. He watches. His eyes move across the hall, across the faces of his warriors, his kinsmen, his guests. He sees who drinks too much, who drinks too little, who laughs loudest, who sits in silence. Because in this hall, proximity is everything. If you sit close to the chieftain, within arm's reach of the fire, within earshot of his voice, you are honored. You are trusted. You have earned your place. If you sit farther back, near the shadows, near the door, you are new, untested, or worse, forgotten. And if you sit outside the hall, in the cold, in the dark, you are nothing. You are not even a name. So the warriors sit, close as they can, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow. Their cups raised, their voices loud, their laughter sharp as blades. And the mead flows, golden, thick, sweet as honey, strong as fire, served in horns carved from the skulls of cattle, polished smooth, bound with bronze. The horns are passed hand to hand, lip to lip, never set down, because a drinking horn has no base. You drink it all, or you pass it on. There is no middle ground, and so they drink. Deep, fast, like men who know that tomorrow the sea may swallow them, or the sword may find them, or the cold may take them in their sleep. They drink because they are alive, and because they will not always be. The food comes next, not delicate, not artful, just real, roasted boar split open on iron spits, the fat dripping into the fire, hissing and spitting. Bread, dark and dense, baked in clay ovens and torn apart with bare hands. Smoked fish, salted meat, onions, turnips, apples from the autumn harvest. The warriors eat with knives, with fingers, with teeth. They tear the meat from the bone and toss the bones to the hounds that prowl beneath the tables, lean and scarred and loyal as shadows. No one serves them. No silent servants. No barefoot ghosts. The women of the hall move among the tables, pouring mead, carrying platters, their faces lit by firelight. Some are wives. Some are daughters. Some are shield maidens, warriors in their own right, their arms marked with scars, their eyes as hard as any man's. They do not bow. They do not whisper. They walk with their heads high, their voices clear. And when they pour the mead, they do so with ceremony, because the mid-bearer is sacred. She is the bridge between the chieftain and his men, between the living and the gods are watching. Always, the fire crackles, the smoke rises, and from somewhere in the shadows, a voice begins to sing. It is rough, low, scarred by smoke and salt and years of shouting over wind and wave, but it is strong, and it carries. The skald, the poet, the keeper of memory. He does not sing of love. He does not sing of beauty. He sings of deeds. Of kings who sailed to the edge of the world and returned with gold. Of warriors who fought 10 men and lived. Of gods who walked among mortals, who drank with them, who tested them, who sometimes killed them just to see if they were worthy. The hall grows quieter, not silent, never silent, but quieter. The warriors lean forward, they listen, because this is how they live forever. Not in stone, not in silk, not in poems written on paper that will crumble and fade, but in song, in memory, in the voices of those who come after. The skald sings of Odin, the All-Father, the god who gave his eye for wisdom, who hung himself from the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights, who learned the runes and the secrets of death. He sings of Thor, the thunder god, the giant slayer, the protector of men, who drank the ocean and lifted the serpent and swung his hammer until the mountains shook. He sings of Loki, the trickster, the liar, the shape-shifter, who brought chaos and laughter and ruin, who fathered monsters and betrayed gods and will one day break free and burn the world. And the warriors listen, and they drink, and they remember, because these are not just stories, they are instructions, lessons in how to live, how to fight, how to die. And when the skald finishes, when the last note fades into the smoke, the hall erupts, not in applause, in roaring, in the clash of cups, the pounding of fists on tables, the stamping of feet on the floor. And then, one by one, the warriors begin to rise. This is the part where they prove themselves. The first man stands. He is young, broad-chested. His beard is still thin, his scars still fresh. He raises his cup. His voice is loud, but it trembles, just slightly. "I am Bjorn," he says, "son of Eric, grandson of Olaf the Red. I have sailed to the west. I have fought the Saxons. I have killed 3 men in single combat, and I will kill 3 more before the winter ends." The hall cheers. The warriors pound the tables. The chieftain nods, just once, and Bjorn sits, his face flushed, his hands shaking, because he has just made a promise, and promises in this hall are sacred. Another man rises, older, grey-haired. His face scarred, his hands gnarled. He does not shout. He does not need to. "I am Gunnar," he says. "I have sailed farther than any man here. I have seen the ice mountains of the north. I have traded with the Russ. I have fought beside kings and outlaws, and I have lived to tell of it." The hall is silent, for a moment. just a moment, and then the roar comes again, louder this time. Because Gunnar has not promised, he has proven, and so it goes. One by one, the warriors rise. They boast. They brag. They tell stories of battles fought, of enemies slain, of treasures won. Some of the stories are true. Some are enhanced. But it does not matter, because in this hall, the story is the truth. And the truth is whatever the hall believes. And if you lie, if you boast of deeds you did not do, of battles you did not fight, someone will call you out. Someone will challenge you. And then you will have to prove it. With your fists. With your blade. With your life. This is flighting. Ritual insult. Ritual combat. The war of words that sometimes becomes a war of blood. But most nights it stays words. Sharp words. Cruel words. Funny words. The kind of insults that make the hall laugh so hard the roof shakes. You call yourself a warrior. I've seen sheep with more courage. At least the sheep didn't run from the Saxons. I didn't run. I retreated strategically into a ditch. A tactical ditch. The hall roars. The mead flows. The fire burns. And beneath the laughter, beneath the noise, there is something else. Something quieter. Something darker. The awareness that this could be the last feast. The last night. The last time they sit together alive, warm, whole. Because tomorrow they sail. Or they fight. Or they hunt. And not all of them will come back. So they laugh loud. Louder than the fire. Louder than the wind outside. Louder than the gods themselves. Because laughter is a weapon. Against fear. Against death. Against the cold that waits beyond the walls. The chieftain rises. Slowly. The hall falls silent. Not because he demands it, but because he is. He lifts his cup. A horn larger than any other, bound with gold, carved with runes.
Warriors,
He says. His voice is low, rough, but it carries. You have fought well. You have sailed far. You have brought honor to this hall, and so I give you this. He reaches into a chest beside his seat, and one by one, he pulls out gifts, a silver ring, a bronze brooch, a blade sharp and bright, its hilt wrapped in leather. He calls the names, and one by one, the warriors rise. They approach. They kneel, not in submission, but in respect, and the chieftain places the gift in their hands, and with it, a promise. This is yours, he says. As long as you are mine. The warrior nods. He does not speak. He does not need to. The gift is the contract. The oath is in the metal. And when the last gift is given, when the last warrior has returned to his seat, the chieftain raises his cup again. To the gods, he says. To the dead, to the living. To the ones who will remember us when we are gone. And the hall drinks, all of them, together. And in that moment they are not just men. They are kin. Bound by blood, by mead, by the fire that burns between them. And far away, in the halls of the gods, in Valhalla, where the Einherjar feast and fight and die and rise again, the All-Father watches. And he smiles, because these are his people. These are the ones who will join him when the world ends, when the wolves devour the sun and the serpent rises from the sea and the final battle begins. These are the ones who will fight beside him and fall beside him and be remembered forever, but not tonight. Tonight they are alive, and they drink, and they laugh, and they sing, until the fire dies, until the mead runs dry, until the dawn creeps through the cracks in the walls, cold and grey and unforgiving, and when the morning comes, the hall is silent. The warriors are gone, or sleeping, or sprawled across the tables, their heads heavy, their mouths dry, their dreams full of fire and song. The chieftain sits alone, his cup empty, his eyes on the ashes. And outside, the snow falls, soft, quiet, endless. The world is cold. The world is hard. The world does not care if you are brave, or strong, or loyal. But in this hall for one night, none of that mattered. Because they lived loud, they laughed loud, they were loud. And that, in the end, is all any of them could ask for. To be remembered, to be sung of, to be part of the story. Even if the story ends in ash, from Rome's decadence to Chang'an's silence to the North's fire, every feast is the same hunger wearing a different mask. The Romans feasted to forget. The Tang feasted to obey. The Vikings feasted to defy. But all of them, in the end, were searching for the same thing. Meaning. Connection. A reason to believe that the food they ate, the wine they drank, the songs they sang, that all of it mattered, that they mattered. And maybe they did, or maybe they didn't. But they feasted anyway, because that is what humans do. We gather. We eat, we drink, we tell stories. We laugh, we cry. We make promises we cannot keep and oaths we will die to honor. We build halls and palaces and temples. We light fires and lanterns and torches. We fill the silence with sound, the darkness with light, the emptiness with presence. And when the feast is over, when the fire dies and the hall goes quiet and the guests return to the cold, we do it again. Because the feast is not just a meal, it is a ritual, a ceremony, a declaration that we are here, that we are alive, that we are not alone, and that for one night we are enough. The hall is quiet now. Only the embers breathe. The warriors are gone. The chieftain has retired to his chamber. The hounds sleep beneath the tables, their bellies full, their dreams twitching with the ghosts of bones. The fire that roared so loud, that lit the faces of men who laughed like gods, it has burned down to ash, red, glowing, soft, silent. And in that silence something remains, not the noise, not the boasts, not the clash of cups or the thunder of voices, but the memory, the story of what happened here, the echo of laughter, the warmth that lingers in the wood, in the stone, in the air itself. This is what every banquet leaves behind. Not the food, not the wine, not the gold or the silk or the silver rings, but the feeling that for one night we were not alone. From Rome to Chang'an to the frozen halls of the north, the banquets were different, wildly different, impossibly different. The Romans reclined on cushions, their bodies soft with excess, their minds sharp with politics. They ate to forget, to numb, to prove they were still gods, even as the empire crumbled around them. The Tang sat in silence, their backs straight, their movements measured, their every gesture a performance. They ate to obey, to honor, to disappear into the perfect order of heaven and earth. The Vikings sat shoulder to shoulder, their voices loud, their laughter raw, their cups raised against the dark. They ate to defy, to live, to prove that death had not yet claimed them. 3 civilizations, 3 philosophies, 3 ways of being human, and yet beneath it all the same hunger, not for food, but for meaning, for connection, for proof that we matter, for the assurance that when we are gone, someone will remember that we were here, that we sat at the table, that we raised the cup, that we spoke our names into the fire and heard them echo back. Humans have always gathered around fire, long before Rome, long before Chang'an, long before the Vikings carved their halls from timber and iron. We gathered in caves, in clearings, in the shadow of mountains and the light of stars. We brought what we had, meat, grain, fruit, water, and we shared it, not because we were generous, not because we were kind, but because we were afraid. Afraid of the dark, afraid of the cold, afraid of the silence that pressed in from every side. And when we gathered, when we ate together, when we told stories and sang songs and watched the fire dance, the fear receded. Just a little, just enough, because we were not alone, and that, in the end, is what every feast has always been about. Not the food, not the wine, not the spectacle, or the ceremony, or the power games played in the shadows, but the simple, ancient, desperate need to be seen. To sit across from another human being and know that they see you, that they hear you, that you exist in their world as they exist in yours. The banquet is a mirror, and in it we see ourselves reflected, not as we are, but as we hope to be, powerful, honored, remembered, or at the very least, present. The Romans understood this, even as they gorged themselves on peacock tongues and dormice stuffed with honey, even as they vomited into bowls so they could eat more, even as they whispered poison into each other's ears. They understood that the banquet was a performance, a theater of excess, a way to say, I am still here, I am still powerful, I am still worth something, even if it was a lie. The Tang understood this too, even as they sat in perfect silence, even as they performed the rituals with flawless precision, even as they bowed and smiled and disappeared into the machinery of empire. They understood that the banquet was a test, a way to prove loyalty, a way to say I belong, I obey, I am part of something greater than myself, even if it crushed them. And the Vikings, oh, the Vikings understood it best of all. They knew that every feast could be the last, that tomorrow the sea might swallow them, or the sword might find them, or the cold might take them in their sleep. So they ate. They drank, they laughed, they sang, not because they were happy, but because they were alive. And being alive in that moment in that hall with those people, that was enough. We still do this. All of us, every day. We gather around tables, we pass bread, we pour wine or tea or water, we tell stories, we laugh, we argue, we make toasts, we celebrate birthdays, weddings, holidays, victories. We mourn at funerals, wakes, memorials. We mark the passage of time with food and drink, and the company of others, because the ritual has not changed, only the setting. The Roman triclinium is now a dining room. The Tang banquet hall is now a restaurant. The Viking mead hall is now a bar, or a backyard, or a living room lit by the glow of a television. But the gesture is the same. We gather, we share, we speak, we listen. We try, however clumsily, however imperfectly, to connect. And sometimes, just sometimes, we succeed. A family sits down to dinner. The table is small, the food is simple. Pasta, salad, bread, nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy. But they talk, they laugh, they pass the salt. They ask about each other's days. And for that hour, that moment, they are not isolated individuals staring at screens. They are together. A couple celebrates their anniversary at a restaurant. The wine is overpriced. The waiter is too attentive. The couple next to them is arguing. But they hold hands across the table. They remember the first time they met. They toast to the years behind them and the years ahead. And for that moment, the world shrinks to just the two of them. A group of friends gathers for a backyard barbecue. The burgers are burned. The beer is warm. Someone's playlist is terrible, but they laugh. They tell old stories. They roast each other mercilessly. They stay up too late, talking about nothing and everything, and when they finally go home, they feel lighter, less alone. This is the banquet. Still, always, not the food, not the setting, not the ceremony, but the connection. The proof that we are not ghosts, that we are real, that we matter to someone, somewhere, somehow. And yet, we live in a strange time. A time when we are more connected than ever, and more alone than ever. We can video call someone on the other side of the world. We can share a meal with 1,000 strangers on social media. We can watch, in real time, as people eat and drink and laugh in cities we will never visit. But we cannot touch them. We cannot smell the food. We cannot hear the real laughter, unfiltered, unedited, unperformed. We sit at our screens. We scroll through images of banquets we were not invited to. We double, tap, we comment, we move on. And the hunger remains, because the screen is not the table. The emoji is not the smile. The like is not the touch. And deep down, we know it. We know that something is missing. Something ancient. Something essential. The fire. The warmth of bodies gathered close. The sound of voices layered over each other, rising and falling like waves. The smell of food, real food, cooked by real hands. The taste of wine, or mead, or tea shared from the same cup. The feeling of being present, not as a username, not as a profile picture, but as a body, a voice, a face, a human being, sitting across from another human being, saying without words, I see you, I hear you, you are not alone. The fire dies, it always does. The Romans fell. The Tang faded. The Vikings were conquered, converted, absorbed into history. Their banquets ended. Their halls crumbled. Their names were forgotten, or remembered only in fragments, in stories told by strangers who never knew them. But the fire was relit by the Byzantines, by the Mongols, by the Renaissance Italians and the Elizabethan English and the Edo Japanese, by every civilization that came after, that built its own halls, cooked its own feasts, invented its own rituals, because that is what humans do. We inherit the ashes, and we light them again. We take the old stories, the Roman banquets, the Tang ceremonies, the Viking songs, and we make them new. We adapt, we evolve. We forget some things and remember others, but we never stop gathering. We never stop sharing. We never stop trying to fill the silence with sound, the darkness with light, the emptiness with presence. Because the banquet is not just a meal, it is a declaration, a refusal to be alone, a refusal to be forgotten, a refusal to let the fire die, even when the world is cold, even when the night is long, even when we are afraid. We light the fire, we set the table, we call to each other across the dark, and we feast. The table waits, it has always waited. It will always wait. The plates are empty. The cups are dry. The chairs are pushed back, as if the guests have just left. But they will return. They always do. Because the banquet is not over. It has never been over. It is the longest meal in history, the oldest ritual, the first and last act of every human life. We are born into it. We are fed by others. We learn to eat, to share, to speak, to listen. And one day, we will sit at the table ourselves. We will cook. We will serve. We will pour the wine and break the bread and tell the stories. And then, one day, we will leave. We will push back our chairs. We will walk away from the table. But the table will remain, and others will sit, and they will eat, and they will remember us, or they will not. But the banquet will continue, because it is not about us. It has never been about us. It is about the gesture, the act of gathering, the act of sharing, the act of saying, with food and drink and fire and song, we are here, we are alive, we are together, and that is enough. So light the fire, set the table, call your people. Not because the food is perfect, not because the setting is beautiful, not because you have something to prove, but because you are human, and humans feast. We feast when we are happy. We feast when we are sad. We feast to celebrate, to mourn, to remember, to forget. We feast because we are hungry, not just for food, but for connection, for meaning, for proof that we are not alone. And when the feast is over, when the fire dies and the guests go home and the silence returns, we do it again, because the fire always dies, and we always relight it. That is the story of every banquet, of every civilization, of every human life, the fire, the feast, the memory, and the knowledge that somewhere, someone is lighting a candle, setting a table, calling a name, and the banquet continues.